Alright pilots, this is Nix coming back at you with another video on how to learn and get better with your SU-25t model FrogFoot. Now hopefully you've watched the first video and you're fairly versed with the cockpit and the steam gauges that you need to understand and the HUD layout, and hopefully you've been practicing your takeoffs and landings. So once that's done, we're basically ready for the fun stuff, right? The reason why everybody wants to get into DCS and fly these powerful military aircraft around, and that is to deploy your armament onto an enemy position and suppress those enemies from further harming your side. And today we're going to hit one of the things that the FrogFoot does quite well, and that is SEAD, or Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses. Basically, we're going to go into the air and we're going to use our ELANT pod to fish out, find, and target enemy radar positions, and we're going to aggress those targets and eliminate those radars so they can no longer track us. The way SAM systems work, in a very general sense, is there'll be search radars that try to find targets, there'll be track radars that attempt to lock up and track these targets in real time, and then those track radars will hand off that information to separate launcher units that are nearby the track radar and fire their missiles onto those targets. They're basically like Fox 1s. So if you eliminate the enemy's track radar, all the SAM systems and all the launchers that are connected to that one track radar will become dormant. And it is very important to suppress enemy air defenses, because until you do that, you can't really move your war forward. You've got to have that air superiority. You have to be able to move troops, fly helicopters, move supplies and everything in an area without getting shot down by enemy SAM systems. So SEAD is very important, and it's been used ever since radar had become a thing, way back in the days of even the Vietnam War era when we were using Shrikes as an anti-rad. So today we're going to learn the keybinds to get started with that. We're going to learn some general loadouts for running SEAD in your FrogFoot. And then we're going to show you how to deploy those weapons. And because that doesn't take very long, we're also going to get into generally some SAM evasion and countermeasuring. We're not going to go deep because, trust me, I can spend 5 hours trying to explain radar, how it works, and how to suppress it, and how to evade it. We're just going to get the basics. It's going to get you in the door and allow you to have a good chance at evading some missiles. So let's jump into the cockpit here and let's start with the keybinds. We're going to bring up our controls. And for deploying our weapons today, we are going to need, we can go right here to modes, and you're going to want your air-to-ground mode. That'll be very important because you have to turn on your air-to-ground mode before you can deploy any weapons or any of your ELANT pod. And then we're going to go over here to sensors, and you're going to need to make sure that your ELANT pod on and off is bound, because you can't shoot anti-rads without the ability to lock up said radiation sources. You also need your lock button. You don't need an unlock target, but you do need a lock button. Then we'll come down here. You're going to want to know what your weapon change button is and your weapon fire button. And that is basically all you need to deploy anti-rads. And for evasion, you're going to want to know where your countermeasure weapon is. So if you go up here to countermeasures, you want to make sure that your countermeasure release. In an advanced lesson, we can learn about the difference between flare and chaff and how those affect different missiles in different ways. But for just now, just have a countermeasure release button set so that you can depress that button and you'll get one chaff and one flare at the same time. And that'll be good enough for now. You also want to know your ECM countermeasure button and your IR jamming button. Those are just systems that you will turn on once you are fencing in to attack. And when somebody says fence in when they're talking about a plane, that just means setting the aircraft up. So if you're going to get fenced in for offense, then you're going to go to air-to-ground mode. You're going to turn on your defensive systems. You're going to turn on your ELANT pod. You're going to get the right weapons selected. That way you're ready for anything in the moment. Your countermeasures are turned on. That's being fenced in. All right, so those are all the keybinds you're going to need. Alright, next thing we need to do is we need to get a loadout. Now, there's a lot of different loadouts depending on what you want to do, but just for now, tonight, we are going to do a very specific loadout that is full SEAD. We're going to load up with our anti-rads, our pod, and just a small amount of air defenses, and we're going to get in the air and we're going to try to take out those radars, because that's what's important. In a FrogFoot, you're not going to go shooting enemy MiGs out of the sky or going after F-15 Eagles. That's not what the FrogFoot is made for. It's made to aggress ground targets almost specifically. And it is really good with anti-rads. So let's check up our loadout. We'll bring up our rearm refuel page here. And here's our beautiful FrogFoot. We're already set up with 90% fuel. Depending on how far you have to go, I usually don't take a full fuel loadout, mainly because the FrogFoot is a heavy girl, like we already learned. And if you're not going to go around and fly for a long time, you're not going to need all that gas. So you always want to plan your missions to where you're not going to try to land with a full tank of gas with a FrogFoot. It's already hard enough to take off and land in this thing. If you're trying to land with a bunch of heavy armament still on it or a full tank of gas, it can be a problem. So we're just going to go out with 90 today, just to make sure we do have plenty of fuel. Down the middle line, this is where you put your ELANT pod. You've got the Mercury pod, which is set up for doing, basically it is IR vision for nighttime. And it does not work in the day. On the day it'll just be a white screen. And here is your ELANT pod right here. That goes on the middle. On the first two pylons is where you can put your very large KH-58 Kegler passive radar missiles. These are your anti-rads, your big ones. 640 kilogram warhead. And these have the most distance. So these are going to be your best shots at hitting radars from as far away as you possibly can, are these 58 kegs. Then you can take 4 other smaller ones, and these are the KH-25s here. These are the AACE-12 Keglers. So they're 320 kilogram warheads, so they're half the size. And they've got about half the boost, too. Maybe even a little less. So you cannot fire these from near as far away. We'll get these equipped up. Now for here, you might want to take some rocket pods because you might want to strafe the area if you get close enough. But for usually, I just take a couple of R-73 Archers, which is a very good heater missile. The R-73 is good. Now the missile that you can put on the outside, the R-60 Aphids, they're very old. They're rear aspect only, and they're easily flared off. They're not very accurate. They're just not dependable. We always put the 410 ECM pods on our outers when it comes to the FrogFoot because the white noise machines actually work pretty decently. So we always equip those, give us our best chance. They're not going to like make SAMs just not hit you, but they will make it a little bit harder for them to lock you up, so you might be able to get a little bit closer before you get fully locked up and fired on. So it's better to have them than not having them, especially when the alternative is a missile that is basically worthless. Alright, so that is our loadout. We're going to pick this up. Alright, and I will see everybody in the sky, and we're going to learn how to deploy these armaments now. Alright pilots, here we are. We are now up in the air. We're heading almost due north in our FrogFoot, and we do have our full loadout. You can see our big 58s and everything else that we've got loaded up. So now we're going to get fenced in. So what we're going to do is first we're going to turn on our DIRCM. Now that's our infrared jammer, in case anyone wants to throw a heater at us or trying to get tone on us with a heat weapon. That's going to help immensely. It's also, if an IR missile is tracking you, the chance that your flares will be successful is actually higher when you're running this. So you always want to have this on. Then we're going to turn on our ECM pod. Now while it's blanking, it's loading up, and when it stops blinking, you know it's completely active. Next we're going to go to our air-to-ground mode, which you can see it says GND in the bottom left, and our weapons we have selected. You see the 4 hash marks, and we see the 25, so we know those are our smaller missiles. Now we're going to weapon select over, and it shows the 2 big ones down on our weapon selector now. Look up here, there's the 2 there, and it's the big Kedge 58s. Also, I would also recommend the stock FrogFoot, everything's in Russian. On the website, on the DCS website in the forums, you can find the English cockpit mod for not only the FrogFoot, but a lot of the other Russian aircraft like the Flankers and the regular FrogFoot, and I recommend you get these. That way your symbology is not as confusing as it's going to be. I just recommend you do that. On one of the other videos, I will probably put a link, or even this one, I'll put a link into the description where you can get those cockpit mods quickly and easily, because I'm pretty sure everyone's going to want to have those. Okay, so now we're in air-to-ground mode. We've got our weapons selected. We're starting with our long-range ones, of course, because we're going to be farther away from the start. We're going to check our AWACS map here. We'll zoom out, and what do you know? We've got some Borkas here. So those are dog ear enemy search radars for SAM systems. And we're going to turn into these and have a look. We are 31 miles out. We're up at about 15,000 feet. So let's turn in and see what we see. And with the FrogFoot, you don't need any kind of master arm switch. This is a Flaming Cliffs 3 aircraft, so you don't have to look over here and find a bunch of toggles and get that stuff turned on. When you switch to air-to-ground mode and you're in the air, you don't have weight on the wheels, you are master armed up. Just another, something that makes it a little bit easier when you first get into these games. In the full fidelity aircraft, you will have to turn everything on manually, of course. Okay, well, it looks like we don't see any radars. Oh, but wait. Maybe we don't see anything because we never turned on our ELANT pod, right? So let's reach up here and turn on our ELANT pod, and that's going to change the symbology a little bit. So now we've got this little circle TDC slew box here. You can see there's 2 radars way out there, but we're looking for a whole bunch of Borkas. So let's go ahead and go back up, and there we go. So DGE, that stands for dog ear. That's a dog ear radar. And that's how easy it is to find them once you have your ELANT pod on. You turn it off, you don't know what's going on. Turn it on, and everything becomes clear. So let's lock up the first one. We just put our cursor over it. We're going to hit our lock button.
Launch.
It's very easy to tell you've got it locked up. And because we're using our long-range KEDs and we're pretty high up in the air, we've already got launch authority. So we're going to fire our KH-58 at the first dog ear. Now, American aircraft and a lot of aircraft, when you hit your trigger or you hit your launch button, it just fires whatever you're trying to fire. Russian aircraft are a little bit different. You have to press and hold to get them to work. So we're going to press and hold the trigger until it releases our missile. And there we go. There's one away. And there it goes. It's going up high. And you know it caught its signal if it goes up high like that. If it just comes off the rail and goes straight, you know it did not get the radiation signal. So let's target the next one now. Which, by the way, this airplane is very hard to fly once you fire one of those Keglers because they're so heavy. So we're going to lock up the second one now.
Launch authorized.
And let's fire off that other kit. Now, you can see it automatically switched to our other anti-rad, so we don't have to select anything else. There's nothing else to select. And you can tell now, you see the caret is moving down now, and this is our actual permission to launch right here, the range. So you can tell there's a lot of range difference between these 2 different missiles. We got to get a lot closer. So let's lock up the next one. And we will keep cruising forward. And we can check our map and see that our big missiles are now cruising towards those targets. So we'll just stay on target now. We're going to get a little bit closer so we can get in range for our other 4 short-range missiles. And now these anti-rads, these Russian anti-rads, they are not as accurate as, say, modern-day AGM-88 harms. But they have good-sized warheads, and they attempt to get close. So usually you're not going to hit the SAM directly. It's going to be splash damage. So let's pickle off these 4, or I should say this is called Magnum. When you're firing an anti-rad, it's a Magnum call over the radio. Pickle is a bomb, and then a missile type would be the missile type you say, Fox 1, 2, or 3. And then if you fire an air-to-ground missile, like a Maverick, that would be a rifle. So here we go. We're going to Magnum these 4 off. There's one. Target the next one.
Authorized.
All right, and all of our harms are now in the air. And let's check our big kedges. They went off first, and here it is coming into the target. Now that is a good hit. Solid hit. Here comes the second one. You can see it went over the target, but it still did decent damage, but it did not blow it up. And that is fairly normal. You're not always going to get direct hits with these older anti-rads. They're not that accurate. They're just trying their best to get to the source, radiation source that they're trying to track. Hopefully you land close enough that it'll at least do enough damage that the radar will not turn on anymore. Or it will outright shack it. See, that's going to go over the top. So that's not a very good shot. That's a good one. That did damage. That's going to go over the top pretty far. And that one's a little closer, but it still went over the top. So that wasn't a bad run. Let's take a look at our map here. We only got one direct hit. We damaged 2 others. So I've seen worse. I've seen plenty worse. Okay, pilots. Now, for this next one, what we're going to do is try to teach you a little bit about surviving a SAM attack. Because if you're going to run SEAD in a FrogFoot, you're going to get shot at a lot. Your harms are not quite as long range as the modern day American AGM-88s and others. So sometimes you're going to get pretty nitty gritty and you're going to have to come in fast and low and try to get shots off in crazy ways and evade a lot of SAMs. We're going to go off a very basic way of doing that for this video today. Now, just some things to know. When you're firing missiles, whether they're anti-rads or even air-to-ground or air-to-air missiles, some basic mechanics of missiles are at play. The higher you are, the farther your missiles can fly, and that's because the higher you are, the thinner the air is. So your missiles retain more energy the thinner the air is, so they can maintain it longer, they can fly faster, farther, and have more agility. So the thicker the air, the air down on the ground is thicker, so the opposite applies. And the faster you're moving forward when you fire said missile, no matter what kind of missile it is, the faster you're going forward, the more velocity that missile has, because it's going to go even faster than what you're going, because it's going to boost off the rail at whatever speed you're moving forward. So if you need more range out of your missiles, whether it be air-to-air or air-to-ground, the higher you are when you launch and the faster forward you're moving gives you more velocity and accuracy. Now, if you're firing air-to-ground, it is still going to come down to the thick air, and that is going to slow it down, but even though you're going to get more speed and distance out of your shot than you would if you're low to the ground already at the start. So if you ever feel like your missile should be going farther and it's weird you're not getting launch authorities or good shooting solutions in your jets, it could have to do with your forward speed and your altitude and the density of the air. So now that that's said, we are going to turn left here when we unpause this scenario, and we're going to fly towards an enemy Russian SA-5 active site. And we're going to let it lock us up, and we're going to attempt to not die. And that's what we're going to do. We are going to dump our load. We're not going to go offensive here. We're going to dump our load because we're going to need our agility to dodge these missiles, and we're carrying a full loadout for SEAD right now. So as soon as we go active, I'm going to dump the loadout, and we're going to get our ELAMP pod turned on so we can see where this SAM site is, and we're just going to cruise for it. We're going to do a little wild weasel play here and see if we can survive it. Alright, we are unpaused, and we're immediately, let's go ahead and go to regular navigation. Let's get our screen up so that we don't have any glare. We're going to go to air-to-ground mode, turn on our ELAMP pod, and let's turn in until we can see that SAM site. The other thing we're going to go through is the RWR here. You can see this little ring around the outside. Here is the radar strength. Oh, we're already getting locked. Look at that. Let's go ahead and dump our loadout here. Let's turn in and turn on all of our ECMs. Go ahead and make sure we're looking at our SA-5. It should be right over here to the left a little ways. So we're getting locked up directly in our front off the left nose, and it's a very strong signal, we can tell. Now we should be nose on. So there you go. You can see that S right there. That's probably the SA-5 site right there. The reason why you can't see the 5 right now is because they're kind of close to each other, so they're stacked up. We know it's a medium range SAM because it's this button here. The next one to the left is large, the other one's small, so it's long range, medium range, short range. The first one here would be an air-to-air lock. So if someone's in the air in a jet trying to lock you up, you would know because that would be the button that's lit up here. These are the directions, and again, that's the strength, and the red being turned on with that loud beep, that means you're actually actively locked up. So we're not getting pinged right now, we're flat out getting nailed. They have us painted. So let's go ahead and hit the burner and let's go straight at them and see what happens. Hopefully we can survive this. So a lot of people think that this is a little daunting because it's kind of super simple, but really this thing's giving you all the information you really need. HL, high or low. So if it was an enemy jet, you know, that would kind of help you, let you know if it's either higher or lower in altitude. If it doesn't know, it'll just light them both. That red circle means it's actually locked, which you'll know by the tone anyway.
Missile 12
Okay, here we go.
low.
So they've got an active missile now. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to beam it and get into the notch, which means we're going to try to fly parallel to the radar that locked us. And we're going to do our best to do that. We're going to ease off the throttle so we don't overspeed the aircraft and lose all of our control services, which is what we're kind of doing right now. Now when we get to the bottom of our descent here, now once we're in the beam, we're in the notch here, we're going to try to start leaving some chaff and flare behind us. Because if you leave your chaff before you hit the notch, the missile is going to probably not see your chaff that much. It's going to stay on you. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and go cold and try to get away from this missile completely. And we're going to go ahead and spam a little bit of chaff every now and then here just to try to further our chances of survival. So it sounds like we chaffed it off. We're no longer being locked. We no longer have an active missile tracking us. So it appears like our hitting the notch and chaffing into the notch has actually freed us from that missile. Now that was a textbook way to survive that missile. The other thing that could have happened is because I descended quickly, that missile might have been driven into the ground. Because the way a missile that's using radar to track you is it's not tracking you to hit you, it's tracking to hit you where you're going to be. So if you're up high and they fire a long-range missile at you like that, if you jump down to the ground and hit the notch and then chaff, you're either going to chaff it off you, or you're going to drive that missile into the ground, or it's going to hit you and you're going to blow up. And of course, when you do go cold, there is a chance you're going to outrun that missile as well. Missiles are not infinite with speed, and they've only got so much boost. So you can't outrun missiles depending on how close they were to you when they fired. So that is dodging a SAM. Get to the ground. When you're going to the ground, make sure to crank to the side and try to get in directly parallel to the enemy that fired at you from the angle they fired it. I know it's hard to tell sometimes, but you just got to do your best. And once you're in that notch, you want to leave some chaff balls behind you. That'll give you the best chance for your chaff to work. And of course, going cold after that is just trying to further your ability to survive. Alright, now that's basically SEAD in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but that's enough to get you started, and that's enough to give you some successful runs trying to kill some enemy radars. Couple that with your ability to take off and land and rearm your FrogFoot, and you should be good enough right now to set up some sand sites of your own and start practicing, or even going to a practice server, setting up your own practice server, or even just going into a server and getting her out there on your FrogFoot and going out and hunting some radars. Alright pilots, thanks for hanging out with me tonight, and the next video we put out is probably going to be air-to-air missiles, or possibly dropping bombs. We'll see which one comes next.
Missile 12 o'clock low.